Hey there, this is Seth Dellinger. If this is the first time you've checked out this channel, what you'll find here is information on the Feldenkrais Method, which I teach, and a lot of videos like this one are about also my experience with the Wim Hof Method. I'm not a Wim Hof instructor, but I have been exploring Wim Hof Method for the past couple months. I intend to continue, and the intersection between Feldenkrais and Wim Hof is just really cool, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about today. But actually, I'm going to back up, and I want to do a little bit of my prehistory. So this is one of those videos, my journey, and but I think before I even get to Feldenkrais and Wim Hof, I just want to explain a little bit of where I got started on my overall journey. All right, so it was about 10 years ago, and let's just say my life was a mess. I was in a marriage that was going to be over pretty soon. I basically had no career. I was doing one thing, but it wasn't working, and I didn't know what the next step was. There was just all kinds of personal issues, and I really didn't know what to do with myself. The only thing that I thought about that had any sense of hope was, well, maybe I can improve my health. And I'd been an off and on again runner, so that's what I started doing. I was running every day. I was working at the time in a meat factory here in Washington, D.C. It was a midnight shift, and I would come home, and I would get home before my wife and my daughter had woken up, and so I would go running. And I started looking into different things. I went to my first ever yoga class, Pilates. Those things were cool, but I was still searching, and eventually I came across the idea of working with the breath. Now this is, again, years before Wim Hof for me, but I began to read about conscious breathing, and I began to experiment. I learned a few things. Don't breathe through your mouth. I started to make a point of that. I think I spent a lot of my childhood breathing through my mouth because I had constant congestion. I used to take a kind of a steroid spray from my nose, but just the inability to breathe through my nose was a feature a lot growing up. So I started working on breathing through my nose, just generally breathing slower. And then I got intrigued. There was all kinds of different exercises, but this idea that how you breathe in and out, the rhythm of the breathing in and out, and maybe sometimes pausing between breaths, just playing with that could create all kinds of changes. But as I said, I was running, and I read something that you could do as a runner, and I didn't know if this was the best thing to do or not, but I thought I'd give it a try, and it was just that you breathe in as you're running for 3 steps, and then for 2 steps you breathe out. So it's an overall 5-beat pattern. And there was a suggestion that if you were going uphill, to alter that and just breathe in for 2 beats, breathe out for 2 beats. So I started doing this while I was running. And I had a musical background from a previous life, let's just say, and it was not your typical musical community. I was in Middletown, Connecticut. There's a composer there, Anthony Braxton, who later became National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Master. Really interesting guy, and one of the things that he used to do is play with all kinds of odd rhythms and time signatures. And I experimented with some friends in groups that I was a part of as well. In particular, I had a group called the Correspondence Quartet, and we would play a lot of fairly improvised material, but we had a cue while we were playing where we could look at each other and we would make a telephone symbol, and then we would point at someone in the band. There was 4 of us, and we had memorized everyone's phone number. So one of the phone numbers was 233-2342, which, if you turn that into musical rhythm, is a bit of an odd rhythm, but we could all look at each other and know that we were going to do it. And even without any music written out in front of us, we could all suddenly lock into 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. So it was this odd kind of irregular rhythm, but we could lock it in. So anyway, back to me running and breathing in for 3, out for 2, and then switching over to 2 and 2 on a hill. I started doing this, and I hadn't played music for years, but actually I was hoping to get back into it. And I realized this is the kind of training that I need in my body to really feel this kind of rhythm. And so I started playing. There was a suggestion for this kind of easier breathing pattern on an uphill. So then I started creating a more complicated rhythm on the downhill. I did a 14 beat pattern. I think it was 7, 2, 3, 2. That's 4, 7. Yeah, that's 7. That's 14 beats. And so, but anyway, that was 7 beats of inhale, 2 beats of exhale, 3 beats of inhale, 2 beats of exhale again. So, kind of had to adjust, maybe in the same way that I didn't play a wind instrument back in the day, but a wind player, they're reading the music and they have to breathe when the music has a rest in it. They have to exhale when the music says to play a note. So they have to be able to constantly change their breathing in and out, kind of on a dime. Other people who are really amazing at that are beatboxers, and it just so happens at this point in my life I was learning how to beatbox, watching videos online, checking that out. So I was learning a kind of a breath control. But just this simple idea of running and breathing, but then your feet are like a metronome. And you can try this if you're a runner, or even if you're just walking. Try playing with different number patterns. As I said, I started out reading in a book 3 and 2, 2 and 2. But really, to me, as I got more into it, what was more interesting is just to find out what patterns can I do. And of course, if the pattern was really uneven, if there was way more inhalation or way more exhalation, it might be a little more stressful and I might not be able to keep it up as long, but I could certainly get better with practice. And what I didn't realize, but what I was doing, is I was training my whole breathing apparatus to be more adaptable, to be able to respond in different ways. And years later, when actually, this was not too long before I discovered the Feldenkrais Method. I discovered the Feldenkrais Method maybe after I'd been doing this running and breathing experiments for a few months. But I didn't know how the Feldenkrais Method worked. But in fact, and maybe I'll get to some of the other stuff in a future video, but let's just say what I was doing by creating these different variations in my breathing pattern and experimenting with doing that while running, I was waking up my nervous system to many different possibilities. And even without thinking that any one pattern was the pattern that I should be doing, I was giving my nervous system more options. It's like, imagine if you always go to the same restaurant, you always order the same thing. One day your buddy takes you to a new restaurant, there's all kinds of things on the menu, and then you start going there all the time and ordering all kinds of different things. You discover that there's foods that you didn't think that you enjoy that you do, and you just expand your possibilities in that way. So you might say I was doing something along those lines with the breathing and the running. Just a couple more examples of how I was doing that. For any given pattern, if the overall pattern was an even number, what it added up to, then that means you would always start over on your right foot, or always start over on your left foot. So whenever I noticed that, I made sure to start the pattern on the left and on the right, just to see how that felt. Another thing that I did at a certain point, when I kind of got sick of 1, 2, 3 and counting in my head, again, because I had a musical background, for something like 3 and 2, it was just easy to go, So I would be using a high note and a low note to kind of, and then creating these musical patterns that if I was counting, they would come out right, but after a while I could just sort of have a musical feel. So I'm running and I'm breathing, and in my head I'm hearing da and da, and I'm da, da, da. I'm doing this kind of thing. But then I got curious. I hadn't really thought about it at first, but the high note was always the in-breath, and the low note was always the out-breath. And you might think that this is just a random thing, but it was another thing that I noticed, well, it could be the other way. So then I started breathing in on the low note, and I started breathing out on the high note. And these are just tones that I'm imagining in my head, but doing that actually shifted, again, my breathing. And I think there is good reason for that, because if you just sing a high note and you sing a low note and you pay attention to the inside of your mouth and your throat and how you hold your tongue, what you feel through your nose, it's different. You have to change all kinds of things in there to produce a higher or a lower note. And what I would discover later through the Feldenkrais method is, without even doing a movement, you begin to activate different muscles to a very small degree, because by imagining a movement, you are beginning to organize that movement. So now if, for example, I asked you to just imagine, not do it, but imagine turning your head to the right very slowly. Imagine turning your head and turning your head back to the middle. Do this a few times. You might actually start to feel along the right side of your neck like something's happening. Like maybe, maybe I almost want to turn my head to the right. Okay, anyway, this is before I discovered the Feldenkrais method, and it's way before I discovered Wim Hof. But now that I've been practicing Feldenkrais for almost 10 years, and I'm just discovering Wim Hof method and playing with it, it's just cool to look back and see that I was already doing some of this experimentation on my own. And lastly, not to try to put myself on the same level or anything, but Moshe Feldenkrais invented the Feldenkrais method. How? Because he was trying to heal himself. He had injured both of his knees, and the surgeons at the time said, "We don't know if you're going to walk again." He said, "I don't like that. I'm going to figure this out." He started studying anatomy and playing with movement, and eventually taught himself to walk again. Wim Hof, he went through this awful, terrible trauma of losing his wife to suicide, and had to figure out how to rebuild his life. And lo and behold, he jumps in icy water one day, and he feels like, wow, I just discovered something. And then he stuck with it, and he followed the path of what he learned by getting in the cold. So it's just cool to me these days, even though there are these practices that already exist with the Feldenkrais method and the Wim Hof method, that I can even look back for myself and just notice a time where things were really bad for me, and I was just experimenting, and I discovered a capacity in myself that I didn't know I had just by trying different things out. And so Feldenkrais and Wim Hof, I feel like, did that kind of thing, and they took it to the extent of really creating a whole method that could help other people. And anyway, I think that's pretty cool. I want to talk more about my overall journey, but I think that's probably enough for today. This is kind of my prehistory before Feldenkrais and Wim Hof, but maybe gives you some idea of what motivated me. Hopefully this was interesting to you, and if you're into Feldenkrais or Wim Hof, or just curious, please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be talking about this kind of stuff a lot more. And leave a comment, like the video, all that good stuff. If you look down in the caption, you will see where you can check out a free training I've put together, 3 simple keys for your meditation practice. It builds on some of these many things that I've learned through the years, and I think you'll find it really valuable. So check that as well. Check that out as well. All right, I'll see you next time.